So let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?
Hey everybody, it's Dave. We're back with episode number 12 on the Maker Zone. I'm really happy to have Mons. He's from an innovation lab at a major media and information company. And Josh, who's a journalist that I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. And he usually asks us great questions, and they pop by today to talk through some of what's happening in innovation. And so I hope you find it interesting today. I'm going to hand over to Josh because he's piled up a bunch of questions. I looked through them, and they're cool.
Yeah,
fire away.
Thanks very much, Dave. Yeah, so we're really looking to try and get a sense of what the opportunities, but also the difficulties of innovating in big companies like you guys have experience with. So, I mean, if you could just take me through kind of, first and foremost, a big part of what you guys do is trying to ingrain innovation into the companies that you work for. So, Mons, maybe starting with you, how do you go about making it part of a company's DNA?
So I think if I was the CEO of a company and I wanted the company to become a more of an innovative company, like a legacy company, not a startup, not somebody that has the sort of the innovation part of it through selection recruitment process, I would really say, we're looking to grow, and we're looking to grow from inside. We don't looking to buy to grow. We're looking to grow from inside. You can have a combination, but I think it's an important message that everybody knows that, what I do can actually help my company grow. Right? I think that is, and not just saying it, but implementing that policy is very important. The second thing I think is, people in a company act often on personal motivations. So unless you set up a compensation and goals and target structure that really favors innovation, you can just talk about it, but it's not going to happen because people do what's measured. And if innovation and sort of new ideas are measured and valued, they will happen. I think that is what you do from the top. I think there are many small or different things you can implement to make that happen. But I think without that leadership, it's really hard to come from just saying it to doing it.
I want to pick up on two things you just said because I totally agree with you, Mons. Growth. You know what growth means, people? It means finding new revenue and P&L in places you didn't have it before. And for banks, that means not net new interest and not transaction revenues. It means other things we're trying to find. So I'd be interested in hearing what you define as growth, and then in terms of motivations, I hope we can talk about that more just now, because how you intrinsically measure and motivate people to become innovative has been super tricky from where I'm at. But
yeah, on the growth thing, I think you can look at it too in a simplistic way. You can grow your existing business, add some new features, address an adjacent market, just make the product a bit faster, a bit better, all of that. Or you can truly look at, okay, who else could I serve that I don't serve now, that is a much harder thing to do, I think, in a big company, to really pivot out and address a completely new market with a new product. If you change product, market, and the business model at the same time, that's three variables to address. So most companies change one at a time. And then you are sort of slowly increasing and sort of widening the scope. But I think now we're seeing there are so many small companies that look at things so differently from what we do. So unless we in a mentality can become a bit like them and be more bold and take bigger bets on big new markets and how the demographics are changing and how people consume information, I think then we will just grow slowly, and I don't think that this can maintain for many years.
it just reminds me of the whole Kodak invented the digital camera when I was still a kid.
Okay.
And basically their executives rejected the digital camera and said, put this away in a drawer and let's not talk about this anymore. I think it was 3M invented the Post-it, and their first reaction to the Post-it was, put this away, this is a joke. And the guy kept bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back, and I think it's the largest single P&L item in 3M's current revenue and their top line revenue. So it's very hard, from my perspective, to make bankers believe that the future of banking involves privacy, open platforms and finance, things beyond banking like artwork and health propositions, because that isn't our core business. That isn't what we accept as top line revenue right now. And it's super hard to get then entrepreneurs to work on that, because line management's telling them, don't work on that, work on this.
Right.
We need the current business model to run, that's your job.
And we believe in open platforms, open systems, because I think if you look at the mobile phone, market, how it evolved from being, custom installed apps that the telco carrier decided what to go onto the phone, until Apple, the iTunes and the iStore revolutionized that and let any developer publish things in there. Like, that completely transformed the whole experience and it made it so much more useful. Yeah. And I think this is really, your traditional manager will say, no, we need to protect what we got, we can't open it up because people are going to eat us. But if you don't open it up, people will eat you anyway, from a different direction, and you're not part of the party, right? Somebody's going to have it.
You're talking a lot about attitudes. So, I mean, where does it come down with innovation in a company? I mean, can you have, just a separate unit that goes off and looks at this stuff and then tries to introduce it wider to the bank, or is innovation everyone's job? Everyone needs to be on the lookout for this.
Can I start with this one?
Please do.
I'll tell you, my attitude towards it is a bad attitude because, I think you need to constantly fight the DNA of an organization, which is to create stable systems and bring instability into the system. So creating offense means you're being offensive to people because you're saying what we're doing right now isn't enough. And therefore it automatically offends basically everyone. And yet to find new P&L line items and revenue and create open platforms, which is what you were just describing as well, you need to find new ways of doing things. And therefore I believe in small, so small groups of people that try to do new things. And as soon as you learn something, tell the other people and keep telling them until they start to understand it.
Yeah, I think just talking about what you do as much as you can to as many people as possible, it helps you because every time you say something, you understand a bit better. So if you just keep it to yourself, nobody's going to hear about it. And you also get great feedback because most of your colleagues know what they're doing, and they're going to give you some really, that is really good. And I think if somebody talks to you about innovation, you should start thinking, how could that work? Not why wouldn't that work? Give it 20 minutes and really trying to figure out why could this work? Or then you said, okay, maybe how can I adapt it so it might work? Not saying, oh, that's never going to work. If you have that attitude, you're not going to get anywhere.
And we've got a couple of pilots that we've been running over the last time. One was kind of a Tinder way of left-right swiping across ideas. And, the first reaction of everyone is kind of like, that'll never work. That's too immature. People don't want that. And so instead of discussing this for the next 6 years, you can either try to be the first to do it in finance or you can be the last who tries to follow it. And so to be the first, we try it and then we fail. And in failing, you kind of learn what do people actually want? Is it that left-right swipe feature or what's the user experience they want? I've had the same with voice, with facial recognition and biometrics. First reaction of any financial institution, which is where I'm from, is no, that'll never work. We have to be careful. When in fact, if you just try a couple of things, you learn a lot more and you find yourself ahead of the industry very quickly.
But I mean, that's the key challenge. And from talking to Mans earlier, he told this to me that the biggest challenge is getting the innovation in the hands of the customer. And we've heard a lot of things about the importance of communication and talking to people when you have ideas. I mean, what's the crucial things in order to make sure that your ideas end up where they're supposed to be?
Well, I think as an innovator, you need to follow the money because the transaction conveys a value. If somebody's prepared to pay something or use it, that actually means that it has some value. So you can't just say, I'm going to do whatever I want completely in isolation. So you need to have a really strong end user in mind. The persona is clear. A route to market is what you're looking for. And then you can sort of, even if it's an odd persona and a weird route to market, at least have something to follow so you can test it out. But I think for me, being in a large company and dealing with the infrastructure and the whole sort of also reputation that comes not being in a startup but being a large company is that we need to minimize risks as a corporation. It makes sense, right? But it makes it harder because if I'm talking to an operations center and say I want to have some servers and I want to have this bandwidth, they're going to buy 4 times what they really need because they need to be very sure. This guy's job is to minimize risk. They're a bit like a lawyer, right? I'm paid on 99.9% uptime and I can't put that at risk. I need that to happen. So everything I do needs to be 3 times more than what you really would ask for. So and that makes it slow and a bit cumbersome to go out there. But I think we are finding ways of solving that, by making fast tracks for innovation projects and other things, just to test it and be really lean and agile.
I'll give you a couple real life examples to complement what Mons just brilliantly described actually is, to build an app, we can have 10 to 12-year-olds build apps at this point. The fact is customers won't download apps, even to test something, unless you give them a really good incentive to do it. So apps are the past, and platforms are the current thing that people use. So if you're already in Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, that's what you're using today. That's where your stuff as an innovator has to be. And yet those channels are largely blocked. Right. The other example is, server time, what you just described, right? So to launch something and get server time at a major institution can cost millions of bucks. And it's not because there's anything wrong with it, but that's the process. Right. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of security, a lot of firewall to do. Whereas a startup can basically put something onto an Amazon web server for $50 and test it. So we're trying to find the balance between don't break the policies, don't break the laws, and yet get stuff done quick. So you can learn as fast as possible, because I think at the core of innovation, that's how I would define it, learning.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think I think there are ways, and we could talk more details on what those ways could be. But I think it's probably the biggest problem, the biggest opportunity also for a large company to find routes around that of staying on track and being the big company that you can trust with everything, and also being the competitive big company that can really hold its own against new ideas and just get stuff done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when it comes to recruiting people and taking people on, I mean, what sort of qualities are key for the innovators of today and tomorrow that you look for?
What do you think?
I think curiosity and sort of wanting to try, thinking about how can I do things differently, not accepting that, oh, we always done it like this, and really stand up for what you believe in. You know, have the guts and say, you know, we should try this and go for it, but also understanding when to stop and you know, abandon and go for something else, not throw good money after bad, right? So I think that is, I mean, it's a bit of a self-selection anyway, because these people will apply to work, right? And I think it's also, there's one thing, detecting talent in your own company, like saying, oh, this person actually, they have a lot of good thinking and they're a bit, you know, they lost a bit in the business as usual. How can we bring them up and give them, second them to a project, this type of thing, right? I think there's a lot of things to do that, identifying talented people, and we've done it. We've tried, for example, corporate challenges, where we make a statement that here's a particular problem. It could be a ranking of search results, or it could be a business model problem. And we invite people to come up with solutions, and we reward the ones that are good. You know, and it's not just for the reward of money. It's more of being known and being detected a little bit. People do work extra to get that done.
We've done the same, and you know, you can give people a GoPro or whatever, but at the end of the day, if you joined a corporation and you went to the right university and you're doing all the right things in your career, you're pretty much a scaredy cat to really go after and launch a business. There's entrepreneurs who launch real businesses. I mean, the year I came out of university, many, many years ago, feels like 200 years ago, there was a couple of my friends who went the entrepreneur path. They worked for a corporation for about 6 months before they left and they started their own businesses. And there was other my friends who made the corporate career. And most of them did that brilliantly. And you have to find your own path. You know, I put on this shirt today and not a t-shirt for the first time in 2 weeks because I have to go to a senior committee today and describe our pipeline so that, because I want them as sponsors to pay me to go take those things farther. So I put on, you know, this shirt, and you did too.
Yeah,
and
sold out, man.
the problem with being a sellout in the corporate environment is you're not an entrepreneur. I am not an entrepreneur, as much as I think I am. If you listen to Gary Vee, people who work at corporations for a long time are not entrepreneurs, but you can bring out the best characteristics of them and still launch product off the back of their talents. You just have to know how to do it in that setting, right? In a corporative setting.
Right. And I think corporates are not used to it and not comfortable with it always. You know, the risk-reward sort of equation isn't always right. You know, the reward is stable. You know, you get your salary as a corporate citizen, and you take some risks which aren't as big at all as the entrepreneur risk. But I think how do you incentivize people to take the right risks? And how do you reward it in a correct way? You know, it shouldn't be free money, right? You need to put something at stake. Maybe that's your weekends. Yeah. Maybe that is, okay, I'm going to give up 20% of my base and I'm going to get 60% more bonus if these things happen, right? Mm-hmm. How can you build that equation that actually rewards good risk taking? I think that is it's a struggle. And the same thing, how do you build a system to spin things off if they are great ideas but then don't fit with your business, right? This could fly, this could grow, but it's not what we want to do. How do you effectively sort of chop that off and get the right people to take that on?
These are super right things to talk about in innovation right now. You're right on it, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, what about the Google 20% system, which, by the way, Google doesn't even use anymore as far as I know. You know, it's really hard to talk to a line manager in a financial institution about, I'm about to take away your employees' heart and soul for the next 6 months and try to spin off a company. And it's impossible to spin off a company. Right? I mean, companies just don't do that every day. And when they do it poorly. They execute it poorly. And therefore, two of the main value props of an innovation function don't work at their core. And therefore, you have to find ways and keep struggling with it every day to still incentivize the people. And basically, it comes down to their passion. Right? It's the wannabe entrepreneurs who never quite had the chance or the guts to do it because they needed money to pay for the kids or whatever. Yeah. Right? And yet, they really had those characteristics, but are in the corporate world, and they're usually very talented. So you can use that in some way.
Right. That's great. I think lots of food for thought there.
Is that all your questions?
No, I have loads more, but I think we have time.
One more.
Well,
do we still have time?
I mean, I think this is great. Could we just keep going?
Oh, right. Well, if I could ask about, we're speaking in Zürich now, in terms of where the innovation is going to come from.
Yeah.
I mean, is this in any way a place to be, or is it London where level 39 where the innovation is really coming from?
Yeah. Just to be clear, I'm not actually from Zurich originally. I'm from Boston. He's not from Zurich
I'm not
either.
from here.
Swedish,
from Sweden,
right?
yeah.
He's Swedish,
So
and
we
you
just-
work.
I work in
Near
Bar,
Zurich.
yeah, near
Yeah.
Zurich, yeah.
So, we're kind of Swiss innovation, aren't we? And there's a lot of Swiss innovation. You know what's interesting is we talked with, I'm looking at Estelle over there, who's from our company. You know what's interesting is we talked with a lot of innovation companies when we first started. I talked with big banks, but I also talked with transport companies and pharmaceutical companies, and they all are struggling with the same thing. And Zurich as a place to be in terms of an entrepreneur is not ideal, and I know that runs against the Swiss fintech thing, but I'd rather be in London, New York, or Hong Kong, just from what I've seen across the world. Singapore is the second destination. I don't find it as sharp as Hong Kong when I was out in both places. I think New York City or Boston or those, but I just can't live there right now because of my personal circumstance. But, I think those are really the places where you launch startups in a purely free way. It's so easy to launch companies. I think Switzerland's trying to catch up, but
Yeah.
what do you see?
I think Switzerland do a lot of things right. It's stable, it's good. There are high quality universities. It's in the center of Europe. There's a lot of opportunity here, I think. And I think people may not have the risk mentality as a default, right? It's a little bit safe, like all continental Europe is in a way, right? But I think the governments and the local governments and the central government are doing things to make it easier, with incorporation, maybe grants and this type of thing, just to get going. And I think there is angel money on early sort of stage investment money in Switzerland. I think it's harder for the second or third round, the millions, right?
That's right.
It's hard to get that here. And I think bringing more foreign VCs here, that actually start actively looking at the Swiss market and evaluating companies and helping Swiss company be seen and tell their story. I think we can help as a citizen of this community. We can make that more feasible, right? Because in London there are so many opportunities to be heard. I mean, there is a lot of noise because lots of people trying to get heard. But I think here, if you have a good story in Switzerland, you will be picked up. You will be detected because it's not that many, right?
You're very right. I usually look at it from the opposite perspective of VCs and money, which is traction creation.
Right.
And it's hard in a Germanic context or French context to then be able to pick up a major market share. But an advantage in Switzerland is that from a finance, now in my vertical perspective, you've got access to not USA. And USA means broker-dealers for most people. So it's a very single system of a way of selling transactions and products that in the rest of the world, private banking and wealth management are operated very different. And the nuclear epicenter of that has been Switzerland for many years. So for me, as a Standort, a basis for a place to innovate on the future of wealth management, it's actually pretty darn good. But I agree with you in terms of getting post-angel seed money, hard here.
But in terms of a magnet for talent, I mean, obviously we're three people who aren't Swiss who came, I'm assuming by choice, to Switzerland. I mean, is it a challenge to attract people to come here, or does everyone want to go to labs in London, or what's the risk
I think
there?
to bring a startup here that is really cost conscious and look at Berlin and they say, I can have this amazing place there, and it doesn't cost much to live and run my company, right? Here they come and they look at the rent cost and all of the other things, right? It's expensive, and as a startup you don't want to bleed money early with fixed costs, right? You just want to focus on building your product and you're sort of bootstrapping it maybe, and that is a challenge, I think, because in the run it's a stable and low tax climate. It's not a bad place to operate a company, but in the beginning when you don't have much revenue, you're not making much on tax savings, right? Because you're not paying much, right? And there are a number of things like that I think could be done to help foreign. I think there is one thing of getting Swiss people to create a company, the ones who are already sort of living in this cost structure and can deal with it. It's not that hard, I think. But to attract up and coming startups from lower cost location, it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's really hard to attract Eastern Europeans, for example, right? Who are mega talented in terms of programming and coming up with apps that actually can launch, and they won't come here, right? They might go to Berlin. I was up in Berlin last week. It's awesome up there. In terms of cost of living, it's very low. But I think the Swiss guys, Kickstart Accelerator, to give them a plug, Patricia and the team, you're doing an awesome job in Zurich. I think they're trying to start to mix it up, but to get to the stage of where London or Berlin or New York is, it's going to take many, many years. And it's a lot more sustained investment, and with a laissez-faire policy from bureaucratic institutions here, hard.
But I don't think it's a goal in itself to copy London or Berlin. I think Switzerland can have its own niche and saying, here's what we're good at, here's the type of company that grows in our environment. This is a hub of this particular subset of technologies or sort of propositions. And if we can position ourselves, and I'm talking like a Swiss now, if we can position ourselves as that, and so, you know, if you need these things, you should definitely look at the Zürich region. You know, then you have a great story, and you don't try to attract every startup that do everything, right? But there are certain startups with certain characteristics or certain objectives that can help work next to companies like yours or mine, and we can really help them grow.
Yeah, look at Christina at Knip, look at the guys from Dine Deal. They did an awesome job launching that. They're incredible, right? The guys from Doodle, which I think I use Doodle every 2 days,
Right.
still to
Yeah,
this
I
day,
do
and that
too.
just got purchased, right? So the Swiss startups that really take off, they really make it too.
Right.
So, yeah. I think we
Great.
answered that one. One more?
One more.
Can I convince you? Are we still adding value? Nick, value meter.
Value.
Value meter? 10 out of 10. One more
Wow.
question.
Just on then the companies where you guys work for. I mean, how do you get the balance right then between, you know, business as usual versus looking 5-10 years ahead of where the company needs to be? I mean, what are the keys of getting that balance right?
Oh my God, it's the compromise question.
Yeah.
Dude, honest answer, I compromise my morals all the time. I throw out a couple of
But
short
do
passes
you feel it's reciprocated in
to
terms
make
of
a
the
couple of yards on the
Right.
field
Yeah.
with senior management so that they continue to invest in us
Right.
as a business, because the business of innovation is a real business, right?
Right.
It's trying to create new operating models. And then I'll throw a couple of long balls. You know, in American football, you call that the Hail Mary pass, which score all the time because you put people to sleep a while throwing short passes, right? So voice recognition, check this out. Oh, we found out a left-right swipe thing, and people are mesmerized by the nearness of that. I can do it. Wow, look at us, we're innovative.
Right.
And then you quietly throw out your long passes because those are the green fields out there you really want to occupy, which is my wine-ome, for example. Those are my things which I'm trying to throw out longer. So.
I think you, as an innovator, you're building business as usual in 10 years, right? 5-10 years. You know, we need business as usual in the future. You know, today's business as usual is not going to hold it in the long term. So you got to think about how do we make money in the future, right? And that is not just incremental improvement of current propositions, right? But I think this is the again, it goes back to what we talked about before, and how do you get things into production, right? I go to a business unit and I say, and they look at me and I say, yeah, that's a great idea, and I think it could work. We've got a customer, but we need to spend 100 million to protect 1 billion, right? How do you compete with that? You know, is a logical choice to say that. You know, if I have $1 billion revenue, I need to spend so much to keep that. That is always going to be approved by the board, and that's the right choice to do, right? They need to protect that money. You can't give that away. But on the other hand, how do you make room for those other ideas that building the $1 billion revenue in the future, right? And how do you? I mean, this is the whole thing we talked about, kind of throughout. Is how do you motivate people? How do you motivate structures to invest in these things and make it possible?
Another real life example that's really painful for me. Senior managers of the world, you do a great job killing innovation, and it's not your fault. You're paid to do that.
Right.
I'm a senior manager, right? So here's the thing. We've been asking for 30 grand to launch a value proposition, which we're pretty darn sure clients want because we asked them. They want to do it. We ask client advisors in a finance context. They want to do it. I cannot get this 30 grand. I've been running around like a beggar for 6 months trying to get anybody to invest in this little business, this little army of people who form themselves. It's a little unit who wants to attack the market. And I can't. And that is so frustrating to create free pots of, resources, because manager's job is to protect the P&L, to protect people, and to not let all these ideas come through, because a lot of ideas can hurt you. Right? I mean, if you look at the various scandals across the finance industry, right? Very creative, actually, very innovative.
Yeah.
Ideas that shouldn't have left the shop, and yet did. And so they're doing their job, but sometimes you got to throw that little pass out and say, you know what, for 30 grand, we're going to try this anyways. And that's my daily fight as an innovation guy.
Yeah, I mean, we said it before, that the people act rationally based on their objectives and the incentives, right? And if those incentives are protecting revenue and largely running what you do now, that's what they do, and that's what they're paid for. So they did actually do their job well, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, how do you define jobs in the best way to encourage this sort of different thinking?
Yeah.
And I think anyone's struggling
But there,
with
I
that.
think, our job as innovation managers is to bridge the divide. So if you run around just hating senior management for doing a darn good job, you're doing a bad job yourself, and you should fire yourself, basically, as an innovation manager.
Right.
If you try to put the two sides together all the time and keep creating connections on stuff, make the love connection between passionate group of people who've identified a thing I can build and measure very quickly and learn from, together with a couple of senior guys who say, I'll take the chance on this, I'm going to stand up for it, in whatever committee, in front of my peers, because it's embarrassing if those fail. And we talk about failure rates being at 75, 90% in innovation. So you say to senior manager A, guy, here's a great thing. We think it might work. Here's some people who really want to launch it. It's probably going to fail and you're going to look bad.
Right.
What kind of thing is that? So you have to be a very good communicator. And even if they fail, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to get credibility with your peers, etc.
I think one of the biggest secrets of being an innovation manager or sort of a champion or a leader is you do sales. A large part of your job is sales.
Basically,
It is sales, you know. It's hard sell because you have to sell. You only have 1 or 2 potential customers because those are the people that work in your company. You can't go to 11 VC and sell the same thing. You got 1 or 2 investors that can make it happen. And you got to sell it to these 2 guys, right? Or
Every
girls.
time.
Every time. And constantly sell ideas. And it's not always a financial transaction. It's sort of an investment or whatever it is. But you do so much sales and you have to believe in it so hard. And you really have to tell that story on how it can work for people, right?
I know we're long on this podcast, you guys, so but I want to add one more thing to this. The constant external pressure on people's egos as senior management is very difficult, right? Because there's the theme of the year, and giving credit now to the Gartner, hype cycle. I look at that thing all the time, like Gary Vee looks at app downloads in App Annie, right? Or wherever he looks, because last year, every senior manager had 50,000 blockchain presentations on his table and was trying to react to that and still look smart in front of his peers and say, I understand what the blockchain is. And then in front of whatever committee, he said, distributed ledger, smart contracts. Right? It's embarrassing. And yet, at the same time, if it's authentic and they really want to understand it, you also have to, feed that and say, what can we launch? Well, in the opportunity curve, we're talking 5 to 10 years from now at economical scale for our business. Therefore, don't put all your eggs in that basket this year and say we're going to throw all our innovation passes at that. You have to hold people back. This year it's AI, right? Artificial intelligence. You could throw a chatbot into anywhere in the universe or say, we put deep learning on this idea. And people are like, wow, oh yeah, deep learning. Check, do it, right? And actually that's super embarrassing. Google can't do deep learning yet. They're trying. But the big internet giants are going to do it long before banks can do it. Therefore, I shouldn't be doing deep learning. So it's this constant negotiation between people's egos, what they're seeing from the outside and learning, and the inside of what we can actually do. But yeah, sorry I talked too long.
No, that's great.
Passionate though.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Lots of interesting stuff to take away from that. So thanks very much, guys. And thanks for having us.
Josh.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mons.
All right.
The companies who will not be named, thank you for watching this. So let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?